Hello everyone, my name is Lucy Constantine. Welcome to the show. Today I'll be reviewing Cormac McCarthy's The Border Trilogy, also known as All the Pretty Horses, The Crossing, and Cities of the Plain. I have a script here that I'll be reading so I don't get confused and bogged down by nonsensical ramblings. Cormac McCarthy was born Charles Joseph McCarthy on July 20th, 1933 to June 13th, 2023. He changed his name in order to not be confused with the ventriloquist Charles McCarthy. McCarthy's work is daunting and impressive, spanning from Suttree to Blood Meridian to The Road, and most recently, The Passenger or Submarus. McCarthy shifted his focus from Appalachian novels of his first three works to Texas in his later works, such as the Border Trilogy, which we will discuss today. The reason being is that McCarthy worked for the Sante Fe Institute, to which he would focus on science. Recently, or before his death, he wrote an essay entitled The Kekule Problem, which was discussed in my last video. He served in the Air Force after dropping out of college. He was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, but was raised in Providence, Rhode Island. McCarthy's influences include Gnostic texts, that is Gnostics texts, the Nag Hammadi, scientific authors that are mentioned in The Passenger, and Submarus, including mathematicians. His other influences include William Faulkner, Ernest Hemingway, William Gay, and John Milton. In one of the passages of Blood Meridian, the Glanton gang is being chased and makes gunpowder out of urine, which is meant to reference Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is one of my favorite poems, and I found Milton a better writer than Shakespeare. One of McCarthy's work was awarded the Faulkner Foundation Award in 1966. I have read the work and it has escaped me most of my memory, but remembered enjoying it. However, not to the extent of how Harold Bloom would memorize a text. Opening passages are important. Here is a quote that I've remembered that comes from the beginning of the book, which is the candle flame and the image of the candle flame caught in the pier glass window, caught and righted when he entered the hall, and again when he shut the door. He took off his hat and came slowly forward. The floorboards creaked under his boots. In his black suit, he stood in the dank glass where the lilies leaned so palely from the wasted cut glass vase. Along the cold hallway behind him hung the portraits of forebears, only dimly known to him, all framed, narrow, wainscoted. He looked down guttered candle stub. He pressed his thumbprint in the warm wax pulled on the oak veneer. Lastly, he looked at the fact so caved and drawn among the folds of the funeral cloth, the yellowed mustache, the eyelid paper thin. That was not sleeping. That was not sleeping. Page 3. There are several things at play here. First, McCarthy introduces us to the prose, which is at once Faulkner and at another Hemingway. The McCarthy podcast addresses this point, how most people compare Cormac McCarthy to William Faulkner, but sometimes he is more Ernest Hemingway in his short decorative sentences than William Faulkner. McCarthy also uses short sentences like Hemingway or Carver. The second thing at play is the use of atmosphere and tone. McCarthy is an expert at expressing the tone of a piece through the use of prose, oftentimes described with a negative connotation as purple prose. Fire is a common theme in McCarthy's works. It is explored through Blood Meridian or The Road, where in The Road there was the use of fire through the expression of man having a fire inside him that should always burn and never be put out. How the child in The Road is a vehicle for light, truth, and justice in a world where none is present. In Blood Meridian, fire represents war and violence and hatred. Here, fire is meant as a companion one has with man and other beings. The candle flame is repeated to provide evidences of the idea, and it was caught in a peerless window, suggesting that sometimes objects so pure are caught in the veil, or in a lesser form of itself, and there are lesser and higher forms of things, an allusion to Plato's higher ideals and forms, or in philosophical classes at college, where the notion of the good and the beautiful are discussed. To become our inner self, where one does not have to hide behind a mask, our inner selves are ridiculed or discouraged. Sleep is where we are truly alive. In Jungian psychology, contrary to Freudian psychology, where dreams are just wish fulfillment, to Jung, dreams carry symbolic and important lessons for man. Oftentimes, what happens in the real world happens in the dream world. Jung recites a man who he analyzed who had a dream, who, in the analysis of the patient had a dream of being submerged underwater. This was a constant motif for the person, and Jung gathered that he was submerged in the unconscious and has still not done shadow work. The patient was trapped in this unconscious and repressed representations of the self to the point where it manifested in sleep. McCarthy, in the Kekule Problem, refers to the conundrum of why the answer to a linguistic solution was answered non-linguistically. The consciousness has been steadfastly at work solving the problem so much that in his unconscious states the answer was solved. There are such occurrences where one meets someone in life later, one in the plane of the real, where they have met in their dreams previously. The unconscious not merely are forms of fulfilling a wish of having ever met a person that could transform their existence, either positively or negatively, is instead a message from the universe, of which the universe is trying to inform us of our future. Sometimes people can predict the future through their dreams. These people were chosen as the last prophets of man, the chosen ones to warn man of his errors and the will of the gods. Those in tune with their feelings or with reality are met with premonitions of another order, an order not yet perceived or understood. In one sentence, it said, caught and righted, and when he entered the hall, again when he shut the door. The candle flame was caught and righted and made erect again. However, it is important to note that the candle flame was only righted once the man emerged from the emptiness of existence or through the vagabonds of a man's mind. As we all know from the movie Oppenheimer, Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to man. Already, man is a crime to the gods, the unwanted creatures of creation, meant before their maker, only to be discarded with disgust and repulsion. If the gods do not want us, why should we want the gods? Man creates God as a form of wish fulfillment. He transfers characteristics he sees in man or nature and transfers them onto a god. If the man he meets is incompetent, his God will be incompetent and full of contradiction. There is a contradiction in the Bible where God is all knowing and wise, yet creates Satan. This is clearly an invention out of boredom and apathy. If God knows all, he knew Satan's fate. If God knew Satan's fate and did nothing about it, then God is evil. One need not read, quote, I form the light and create darkness, I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things, from Isaiah 45:7, to understand that there was a loss in translation between whoever received revelation from God to whoever tried to write down the Bible, whoever made the revision of the Bible in order to satisfy a committee, to whoever published the Bible in full. There have been numerous editorial revisions of the Bible that one can only look up such revisions and see that the Bible is not the be-all, end-all of all wisdom in religious texts. In one portion of the book, in the beginning section, there are recurring motifs being explored throughout all the pretty horses in McCarthy's legacy as a writer. There are shifts in perspectives when the topic of fire is brought into fruition. In the road, it is played along the lines of carrying the spirit of humanity and not letting the evil people of the world change who one is. In Blood Meridian, there is a different sentiment. Moreover, on page 4, it states, quote, I appreciate you lighting the candle, he said. Como? La candela, la vela. No fui yo, she said. La señora? Claro. Ya se levantó antes que yo. McCarthy does not translate his Spanish sentences, and this works to better engage and provide more work for the reader who has to read the text. Here in this quote, the image of the candle is meant as an entity of that which brings forth warmth to man. What can be drawn here is that fire, contrary to modern conceptions of fire being destructive and evil, can be viewed as a metaphor for an entity that brings warmth to the coldest of places and light in the darker places. Mankind is caught in the substream of light and darkness. Whether man succumbs to evil is a fate that man must decide. Quote, what he loved in horses was the heat of blood that ran them. All his reverence and his fondness and all the leanings of his life were for the, and I shortened the quote, and there would always be and never be otherwise. End quote, page 6. Here is the main theme of the novel, the romanticization of the West in the upcoming replacing of colonization and mechanization of the West, the change from horses, farm work, to factory work, and child labor, which caused severe illness upon a large group of people. The novel is about the coming to terms of a changed world of which its inhabitants are not yet ready to partake in. Quote, what's the most you've ever driven? You don't need to know. End quote, page 11. This quotation isn't important, but it reminds me of Anton Chigurh when he flipped a coin in a gas station and he talked to a store clerk about what's the most he ever lost in a coin toss. Quote, the good book says that the meek shall inherit the earth, and I expect that probably the truth. I ain't no free thinker, but I'll tell you what, I'm a long way from being convinced that it's all a good thing. Page 13. One of the characters reflect on a passage from the Bible. It is adapted from Beatitude, from the Sermon on the Mount. It means that those who are kind and gentle shall inherit the earth, which means that they will thrive once the time is needed for them. The character of the focus of discussion is unconvinced that being good is a good thing. This relates to problems of suffering. How can one person in one area of the world be fine without any problems, while other people in other parts of the world have to endure such brutality and carnage in a cold and different universe? There is, not to be a reductionist, two separate paths for one to fall into, an optimist or a pessimist. However, it is important that life is not that binary, and one does not fall into one or the other all the time at every part of the day. Quote, you want to flip to see who gets to shoot him? End quote, page 40. In this quote, the characters decide the fate of the horse to the laws of the universe, leaving things to chance to please one's own inhibition. The primary focus of removing one's agency from the world is to avoid being held accountable for one's actions. Following the choice of murder to be placed under the hand of God is common and lackluster. God kills all the time. There is a quote from Hannibal Lecter where God is terrific by killing members of his own religion via destroying the church. What is the ultimate function of destruction? To make new way for future creation. One builds by destroying, and one destroys by creating. Acts of creation can be seen as vehicles of erecting order into a universe where none has been set. Why make this notion? Did God have a choice in creating us? Could he have changed the future of making the choice of creating man? Or is God, like us, stuck in the confines of one's own being? If God were to be composed of as being or in parts, man has no choice in his life. All his actions are meaningless and fruitless. However, we were granted the luxury of believing that our actions matter. What is the use of man to a God? Does God need man? It seems more often than not that man needs God more than God needs man, even if the reason man needed God was due to God's own doing. God has a plan. What happens if we pray for something and it does not align with God's plan? God does not seem to care all in all. We are just a number according to religion. Our individual persona does not compute with what is considered more important to God in the daily burning traveling of our being. Quote, you can't tell what's in a country like that until you're down there in it, he said. Page 59. In this quote, one of the characters remarks that one cannot know a country until one visits a country. This is in a way true. While one doesn't need to murder someone in order to know what murder is wrong, even under a relativist standpoint, one still needs a general conception of what murder is, that it is indeed wrong, and that doing this action is also wrong, because the action itself is wrong. For why should Adam and Eve fear disobeying God when the act of disobeying has not occurred yet, and does not fully realize the results of their action? Did Adam and Eve know that eating of the fruit would be wrong if they had no idea of what exactly wrongness is? According to modern law, just because one is unaware of the severity of the crime does not remove the crime itself from existence. If a child murders someone, there might be some sympathy from those attending jury duty, but the child's actions are still wrong, regardless if the child was brought up with Judeo-Christian values, as if prescribing a child Christianity would be any good for them, when considering the Christian moral would be to in the Bible, where it suggests that beating a slave is okay so long as the slave lives afterwards, or stoning, which is which woman's to death, or how women should not have hold higher positions to men in hierarchical structures. This was all in the Bible, and the answer to the question of whether this should be kept in place until future generations is no. Clearly, in the progression of the human race, some texts of the Bible and the Quran too must adopt to modern times or be left aside to wither away. Moreover, the problem of if a tree falls and there is no one to see the tree fall, the answer is no. At what point does our knowledge of a tree falling from a forest without an observer can be brought into our consciousness? It can only be seen by an observer. We must, after an experience of seeing the tree, must have seen a tree fall and could conclude that due to weather, rain, snow, wind, gravity, that things don't stay the same all the way through. What if we put a camera? Well, one has to presuppose that this would work regardless if a camera is there. One can be agnostic about it, but because we have seen trees fall in the past, then one can assume that trees fall in the future, and the camera must be observed on top of the observing the forest. It is an illusion, and just like how consciousness is an illusion. There is no clear objective viewpoint or standing up point for where consciousness is or where it resides and how it works. We know some things about the brainstem, the amygdala, but there is still data about the brain that we don't know about, such as the God part of the brain, whether they exist or if it can be computated. Quote, John Grady crawled out and got his boots and jacket on and walked out to study the new country as it shaped itself out of the darkness below them. End quote, page 6. This statement for the book is a summary of the novel. One could assume that given between the data set forth, that the shadow shaping itself out of the country is the country itself changing into something new, something other, something unforeseen. The change of the country would, of course, be a result of capitalism, westernization, and mechanical labor, machines taking away the jobs. This is the current issue with the rise of AI taking away jobs from people. And eventually, man has to decide if he should merge with AI or be tossed aside to the garbage bin. Notions of this topic are found later on, where it says, quote, John Grady looked out over the plain where the last remnants of sunlight were being driven toward the low hill to the south. End quote, page 70. In this quote, John Grady looked over the plain where the last remnants of sunlight were being driven toward the hill to the south. The south is met with darkness. In the road, the father and son plan to head south in the post-apocalypse wasteland because they think that the south will save them, like man to God. But what is God to man? Quote, every dumb thing I ever did in my life, there was a decision I made before they got me into it. Page 75, end quote. Here we will discuss free will. Do the characters exhibit free will when committing bad mistakes? No, there is no free will either. The brain makes decisions faster than the body does. If the body thinks about doing something, the brain has already sprung up the thought into existence. Free will comes up in McCarthy's work as well. In No Country for Old Men, the main antagonist of the novel flips a coin between kills as though he was not the cause of his own actions. In the world, God has no choice but to destroy the world. Evidence of God destroying the world is not exclusive to McCarthy alone. In Genesis, the Bible wipes away the earth out of anger and disappointment of his own creation. Quote, nothing moved in all that great landscape. End quote, page 85. I bring up this quote not for any relevance, but because it reminds me of the opening of the road. Quote, you think God looks out for people? Said Rowling. Yeah, I guess, do you? Yeah, I do. The way the world is, somebody would wake up and sneeze somewhere. Before you're done, there's more. And I shortened the quote. All the hell you don't know what's going to happen. I say he's just about got to. I don't believe we may notice it a day otherwise. Here, the main characters argue about God. Welland asks if you believe in God and whether God looks out for people. The responding character says that God is obligated to watch out over creation. Why would this be? For all we know, God could be evil and apathetic. It would explain the chaos and disorder and evil in the world. So why wouldn't this be the case? But is God responsible for watching creation? In some aspects, no. But man would prefer the other option. Quote, he spoke of horses killed under him, and he said that the souls of horses mirror the souls of men more closely than men suppose, and the horses also love war. Men say that they only learn this, but he said that no creatures can learn that which his heart has no shame to hold. His own father said that no man who is not understand the horse, and he said that he supposed he wished that this were not so, but that it was so. Page 111. Here, the belief that the horse have souls is a function of animism, where man attributes characteristics of himself onto other entities. There have been studies regarding the soul aspects of plants and animals. I will leave that up to the viewer on whether plants and animals have souls. However, this topic delves into animal rights. Do animals have rights over others? Should man place an effort in saving animals? I heard somewhere in his response to this that animals don't seem to care about rights towards themselves or other animals as much as humans do. John Grady loved to ride the horse. In truth, he loved to be seen riding it. In truth, he loved for her to see him riding it. End quote. Here, the main theme of the novel comes up into fruition once more. It states that John Grady loved riding horses, but loved others seeing him ride horses as well. This is meant to romanticize the West and the Old South before mechanization of factory labor. Quote, for me, the world has always been more of a puppet show. End quote, page 231. To allude to another author, Thomas Ligotti speaks about man and consciousness and free will in The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, where he says that man is a self-conscious nothing and that he is hung together by a puppet show, by a puppet master, and we can't escape his ever-present grasp over us. End quote. I sent a boy from this country to the electric chair in Huntsville in 1932. End quote. Page 293. This quote reminds me of the opening of No Country for Old Men, where the sheriff starts off the novel by reminiscing over a prisoner he sent to electric chair. The Crossing is about Billy Parham, who encounters a she-wolf and decides to take care of her. People give him strange looks as he passes through the streets. He tries to make it to New Mexico. The Crossing is a beautiful novella about a man and a wolf, a juxtaposition between man and horse. The story reminds me of Romulus and Remus, who were taken care of by a she-wolf at the bank of a river after they were abandoned by the mother by the command of Mars, the god of war. The similarity ends with the wolf and Billy, but it is nice to derive memory from ancient times and implement it into modern times to see how one can avoid history. The novel is about animal rights, the dying West, Billy joining the army but failing due to a heart murmur, and how we are all one single conscience. There are several quotes about pantheism, a belief that everything is conscious, or that all things are related. In the complete short stories of Ambrose Bierce, it states that, quote, consciousness is a creature of rhythm. Glad and terse as the statement was, I now found it infinitely alluring. At each recurrence, it broadened in meaning and deepened in suggestion. While here I thought is something upon which to found a philosophy. If consciousness is a product of rhythm, all things are conscious, for all have motion, and all motion is rhythmic. I wonder if Marston knew the significance and breadth of the scope of this momentous generalization, or had he arrived at his philosophical faith by the tortuous and uncertain road of observation. Page 93. The character in Ambrose Bierce's short story suggests that everything is consciousness and has a rhythm and has its own motion. We are now moving to Cities of the Plain. John Grady Cole comes back into the story again. They are looking for a horse. The whole trilogy is about the emphasis of the men losing their horse and experiencing the West before colonization. While you do not have to read all the pretty horses before the crossing, it will be beneficial for you to read both before Cities of the Plain so that you won't get confused at the end of the third book. The cities of the plain refer to the Bible. In the Bible, there were Sodom and Gomorrah along the cities of Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar, Bela, which made the 5 cities of the plain. There are references throughout the Old Testament and New Testament. There are examples of dream symbolism throughout this part of the novel. Dreams are meant as representations of the unconscious, trying to break free from the realm of the unconscious and conscious awareness of the self. Dreams explore issues of our inner beings we are trying to sort out in our life, and the unconscious mind tries to sort out one part of life that is being ignored. Once, according to Carl Jung, one performs shadow work, one will be in touch with their conscious self. While the work is difficult and far from easy, every individual must evaluate the problems of their lives before hostility. In my analysis, we are put here to find out what are mistakes and issues that one might face and solve them before death arrives. If one does not do so, then one repeats their life as they have lived it before and will live it until the main problem is fixed. Life will repeat itself. However, contrary to standard forms of reincarnation, you will wake up in the same life. This comes from Nietzsche's work in the Gay Science, and he talked about a passage from the book where it states, quote, what if a demon crept after you into your loneliness someday night and said to you, quote, this life more and more innumerable times, and there will be nothing new to it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and every sigh, and all the unspeakably small and great in thy life must come to you again. And all in the same sequence, the unspeakably small and great in thy life come to you again, and all in the same sequence. End quote. This comes from the Gay Science, Book 4, Aphorism 341. To close our review, eternal recurrence is the confrontation of the demon approaching you in your sleep, telling you that you will have to live your life once more. Would you cry in joy or cry in agony over this realization? The choice is yours. Thank you for watching and have a good day.